Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Morning Bulletin. Here on the Blood Red channel, I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is James Martin, and we're going to start today with a little bit of a transfer chat for you all. Obviously, that's pretty much all this morning stream is during the transfer windows when they're actually open, but try and do it a little bit less when it's not. But a little bit of news coming out of Wolverhampton. Gary O'Neill coming out and saying that Pedro Neto is very happy at Wolves. He's a player Liverpool and a host of other Premier League clubs have been linked with, especially since the start of this season. He's got 6 assists in 9 games, one of those against Liverpool. I think that probably the first thing to discuss when it comes to Pedro Neto, James, is obviously one of the reasons he's getting linked with everyone now and sort of hasn't been talked about for a while is he's got a really poor injury record. Had a really bad last couple of seasons. Like I say, only really come back and started playing regularly. Now, do you think that's something that Liverpool would need to be wary of, and any other clubs that might be looking at him if there is a potential deal on the table?
Yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of, isn't it? I suppose what you might say is that he's had a hard time in terms of long for the most part, which in a weird kind of way is maybe a little bit better than sort of constant niggling concerns. You can maybe think, well, okay, we'll see how he does, and it looks like he's put it behind him, in the sense that he's come out, really strongly at the start of this season. Um, so yeah, it's you'd have to look at it as a club and say, like, are these the kind of injuries that he has a propensity to, or has he just been really unlucky, which can happen. So yeah, it's definitely something that would be a sort of an amber flag, maybe not quite a red flag, but yeah, it's certainly part of the equation to factor in, because if you're not looking at injuries, then you're looking at a player who I imagine would be much higher up the list in terms of these discussions.
Yeah, still only 23, like I say, so very young. Could, as you say, had bad luck with a couple of bad serious injuries. So hopefully, obviously, manages to stay fit for the rest of this season and beyond. I mean, it was impressive against us, and he's impressed. I've seen him sort of in fleeting moments throughout the season so far, and he's impressed me when I've seen him, and he does strike me as the sort of player who could come into the Liverpool team and excel and sort of explode a bit like Diogo Jota did, obviously another Portuguese international coming to us from Wolves. But in terms of other potential stumbling blocks for any kind of deal here, James, I mean, attacking options probably last on the list of priorities for Liverpool when it comes to the January transfer window and maybe even the summer as well.
Yeah, I'd have thought so. I mean, of course, there's the question mark about what happens with Salah, isn't there? You'd look at that as, particularly in the summer, if he does move on, if he does get sold, then maybe attack comes up the list. But even then, you look at Liverpool's options if Salah goes. Obviously, you don't want to think about Salah going, and clearly it would weaken the front line massively. He's been, a key performer so far this season, as he has been every year he's been here, really. But even if you take him out, you're looking at Diaz, Jota, Gakpo, Nunez. That's one of the strongest front lines in the Premier League, even without Salah, which is mad to say, but it is true. So you look at that and think, is Liverpool going to suddenly shoot a like for like Salah replacement to the very top of its list? You might say maybe not. I think you'd still want to be looking at recruiting someone else for the front line if Salah left, but I don't necessarily think, like you say, it would become priority number one. Certainly, as soon as January, you'd be looking more at the defence there, potentially even another midfielder in that kind of holding role, depending on where Klopp wants to go with that kind of evolution of the midfield. So yeah, it's not a completely ridiculous link. I could see us looking at a player of that profile in the not too distant future, depending on what happens with Salah. But no, I don't think he's right at the top of the to do list, if you like.
Yeah, interesting. You touch on Salah there and sort of the predicament about whether he's going to move on in the summer, what's going to happen. Where do you come down on that one? Because I think when all these bids were, the silly money was flying about, and towards the end of the window, and it was Saudi have bid 150 million for Salah, 200 million next, whatever. I think a lot of people were sort of it was sort of assumed as a cert that come next summer, if he doesn't go now, come next summer, it's almost nailed on that he'll go. But I mean, you look at the production levels, it's just not dropped off, has it? Do you think there's an argument that Liverpool should be sort of sitting down at the negotiating table with Mohamed Salah again and trying to tie him down for another couple of years or maybe a year's extension, something like that on his contract.
Definitely. I can see the case for it. Like I said, he's been probably the key performer for the team this season. He's leading the way in goal contributions, I think, in the entire Premier League, factoring in goals and assists. So, he's not really slowed down too much at all. I think really it just comes down to Salah, but I think it would be negligent not to at least give him something to think about and put some kind of offer on the table. It's obviously tricky for FSG because Salah's by far the highest earner, and much as his production hasn't dropped off at all just yet, his contract does run until 2025. So, any extension takes him into sort of, 34, 35 kind of territory in terms of when the deal would run out. You'd maybe be saying, well, okay, but we'd try and sell him a year before that, but it doesn't always work out like that. So you are, committing to paying probably what he's on now, if not more. Who knows what he would command in negotiations, for a long time to come. And it's a big gamble, but I think it's got to be done in a sense. You can't just accept him going. It's he's chasing down club records. He's still the top performer. It would be disappointing if there wasn't, at least if it wasn't just put to the player like, you have the choice. There's a deal on the table from Liverpool. There's a deal on the table from Saudi Arabia. What do you want to do? If it's just, we're not going to renew, off you go. I think that's no way to treat not only a club legend, but someone who is, like I say, at the very top of his game still. And I think it would potentially even convey a lack of respect to him in terms of, how he viewed things. So yeah, it's really tricky. I don't think it's an easy one to answer, because you don't want to, make a decision based on kind of your gut feeling and your sentiment, and then find yourself with, by far the highest earner staying well past his peak. And you don't want to necessarily sort of have your judgment clouded when you can cash in, maybe 100 million plus on someone who's going to be 32 in the summer. So yeah, I think whatever way it goes, I'll probably understand it. But I think you're right to point out that maybe we're treating it too much as a foregone conclusion, and maybe there is a realistic scenario where he stays for a lot longer and hopefully breaks a lot more records.
Yeah, hopefully that is what happens. I mean, you say it's a gamble, and I think that's the way. I think that's the best way to phrase it, really. But for me, it seems, for the most part anyway, it seems like what we're really gambling on is, will Mohamed Salah at 35, 34, 36, whatever, will he still have the legs? Will he still be able to go? Because if he can, I don't really see what else could slow him down. So for me, it does seem like what we're gambling on is can Mohamed Salah take care of himself the way that he has throughout all of his career, really. I mean, every time he scores and whips his top off, I forget how ripped that man is. I mean, honestly, the shape he's in is unbelievable. So if anyone can keep going like that, do like a Ronaldo, play in the top leagues until you're 38, whatever, I really don't see why Mohamed Salah couldn't be the sort of person that could do that. And if he does, why not have him playing at Liverpool rather than wasting his time in Saudi Arabia? I know we've seen the figures of Steven Gerrard's loss in front of about 600 people. I mean, what is the point in a player of Mohamed Salah's stature? I mean, obviously, we know he's a big figure over there, but for me, while he's still got at least this level of production in him, I really think Liverpool should be trying to tie him down for another year or so. But we'll move on to our second topic of the morning. Virgil van Dijk has implemented his first real change as Liverpool captain. He's introduced a pre-game huddle. I don't know if you noticed it, James. I did actually clock it ahead of the Merseyside derby. I'm not sure if I've seen it before that, but he says it's something he brought over after his playing time at Celtic. He said it was something that he felt helped everyone sort of get up for the game. And he also said it helped let the fans know that everyone was sort of ready. And when he was speaking about it, he sort of mentioned the atmosphere and how hopefully doing this pre-game huddle, especially at Anfield, will sort of help fans know that it's time to get ready and sort of start building the atmosphere up a bit. But I mean, what have your thoughts been on him as a captain thus far, James? It was his 50th game wearing the armband, I think, against Everton, even though he's obviously only been made permanently the skipper since the summer. But do you like what you've seen so far? Do you think it's sort of maybe helping him return to maybe not his former peak, because obviously, I mean, he was the best centre-back in the world, and he was finished in the Ballon d'Or top 3, didn't he? But certainly sort of scaling the mountain towards reaching those former heights.
Yeah, I mean, he finished second, didn't he? Like just a few points behind Messi. It was that was a tough one. But it's I've just been imagining him, new to the UK in a Celtic huddle, trying to understand what on earth Scott Brown's saying, to be honest. But aside from that fun image, yeah, I think it's been good. I think we can probably overstate the importance of the captain's role, but at the same time, I think we can understate it. People say, it's the modern game; it counts for nothing. I think there's probably a value in it, if nothing else, in terms of, if the player who you give it to feels that sense of responsibility and feels that kind of honour of it, then, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it could raise their game a little bit. It could. I don't think Van Dijk needed to be made a little more vocal. I think he's always been that leader anyway. So no real change there. But yeah, I think whether it's coincidence or not, we have seen him raise his game a little bit. Like you say, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's back to his former glory, but I don't think he's too far away. I've seen people sort of sharing the numbers around of tackle percentage, things like this, and he's up there with his peak season where he was in that Ballon d'Or conversation in a lot of the key metrics. So I find it hard to analyze defenders in a lot of ways, particularly using those numbers, because I mean, you hark back to that famous quote, don't you? If I have to make the tackle, I've already made a mistake. I think Maldini or whoever it was, but could have been Baresi. But it's just, I find it harder to analyze defenders. But just on the eye test, I think he's looked a lot more secure, hasn't he? There were times last season where you were thinking a bit, oh dear, have his legs gone? Will he ever be back? And I think he's been really solid. I think he's been our best defender, which maybe at times last season you couldn't even necessarily have said that with the form of Matip and then latterly Konate, I suppose. But it's hard. I don't necessarily think you can attribute it to the armband, but it hasn't hurt. And I think you could say the same with Trent, couldn't you? Becoming vice captain straight out of the academy, it's going to mean a lot to him. And yeah, I think it's a nice thing, and I think they're doing a good job. I don't think it's been a game changer. I don't think the huddle's been a game changer either. But it's not going to do any harm, is it? And it's nice that he's sort of put his stamp on the team, I suppose, with that kind of, this is my idea as captain, and now we're going to do it. I think that's good.
Yeah, spot on. I think it's important for him to sort of have a bit of an influence with the armband in those sorts of ways. But that is all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. So, James, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.